Hi and welcome back. Today we're talking about life pathways. So, as you can tell, a lot of these are like frameworks or, approaches, and again, they're going to feel a lot of them have overlap. But I wanted for myself at this time when I created this one, I wanted to create something more concrete because I, as you can tell already, am just like flowy and go in a million directions and often, choose to take a left and then, wind down by the river and forget like I was supposed to be over here on this highway. I literally have like gotten distracted for years in my life. And so I wanted in this notebook here for me to have something that was still fun and exploratory in nature, but that were pathways of exploration that could be taken within a certain focus. Again, this will not apply to everybody, but I'm just going to share all the pages anyway. So I wanted to think about how I will choose to share and express. And I wanted, a foundation, a life path foundation for, I called it venturing into life. I wanted to bring more adventure into, which I naturally did this into my life and my work. But I had done it up until this point in a way where in terms of work, it was one thing. In terms of life, it was another thing. So in terms of work at the time, it was very, driven by what I had learned in my career background, education, practice skill, those sorts of things. And in my life, it was sort of this, wild exploratory process that sometimes led nowhere. And what I wanted was sort of to bring both the best of both of those, but to create a pathways or pathways to purpose, I called them at that time, pathways that would be intriguing, or interesting enough for me so that I wouldn't lose interest, especially if I was focused on something that was more of a project or more of a, have to do at that time, like in my business or in even my life. So like that home, I was focused on, kind of creating more of a home feeling in my home. And that's not something that I'm necessarily good at or naturally drawn to. And I love doing it, but it's often down on the list. And I wanted an approach these pathways to these ways to move something forward that were aligned with my authentic way of being, which, as I've said, is very flowy and intricate and needs a lot of room and a lot of space. So I knew I wanted to be like, when I started this, I didn't know what I was going to put on here yet, but I just wrote life pathways or life pathways in the center. And I drew this little green thing here, which was like either a staircase or, to me, it felt like an unfolding magic carpet sort of thing. And that's the feeling. So you might want to start with like, what's the feeling you want to have as you go about anything in your life or your work? Like, what's the feeling? And so for me, that was expressed in this, like, I saw it both ways at the time, this magic carpet unfolding brochure slash stairway. Like it was, and it was, the stairway was a spiral staircase like that I was imagining. So movement, you get the idea. And then, so the next thing I did is I stayed with that feeling first, and I wanted it to be colorful and creative, especially back then. And this was very similar to my Creative Revolutions logo. Actually, the logo was nicer, but just created these, these colors of the rainbow. So I drew those pathways coming out, and I noticed that there were 7. And I thought about, like, what do I love? And I thought, I love writing. Like, how do I approach things? How do I like to think about things. I like to write. I like to draw and doodle. I like to just imagine. I like to dream. I like to think of new approaches and innovative, kind of ideas and share them. So I started writing a list on a separate page. This is one that I did do a separate page, and I noticed there were a lot of I words on it. So I just decided I'm going to do five. I'm not 5, 7. I'm going to do 7 I words. So writing became ink, photography and visual stimulation of various kinds became image. So ink, images. My innovative kind of love for thinking of new approaches became ideas. Inspiration ended up on here. Integration ended up on here. Those two were both, remember, on my principles. Imagination, because I absolutely adored, especially when I was little, like creating imaginary worlds and like literally bringing them to life, and believing in the power of imagination. And it's really something I haven't lost. I learned not to share quite as much as I used to, although these days I don't really care. So anyway, imagination and innovation, because that really applied more to my approach, and particularly in my work at that time, and true today too, to the point that my business now is called Soul Simple Innovation. And so these I words, ink, images, ideas, inspiration, integration, imagination, innovation, became the pathways that I could apply to anything. So as an example, I want to tell you how this worked for me. This one really was amazing, because at the time I was feeling kind of trapped, like I'll never get out of, and it did take me a long time after that to not that I didn't enjoy what I was doing, I did, but it felt like I had to. And so this super helped me when I had to work on, or when I needed to devote my attention or time to a practical problem at home or a work project that needed to be done. I could secretly or not, I could literally take a piece of paper and think, how can I move this project forward or come up with new solutions through all these different pathways. So what that might look like, let me think of a good example. Like let's say I wanted to, well, I'm going to go with something more recent because I've been painting. I want to create an art series. Okay, well, let's start with ink. What do I think that I want this to be? So I just write something, because I am a writer. That's natural for me. And so I would write, like, oh, I think I should explore, like maybe I should think about those pictures that I saw the other day of the ancestors that really spoke to me, and I wonder what their lives were like. Oh, like maybe I could create, and I'll think of, about this, ancestors, and then I'll write something that is maybe a description, or maybe I'll be more analytical in the writing and say, like, what tools do I want to use to create this art series, and what do I want it to be about? What are the themes? So writing, so ink, images. I literally could go, take pictures. I could go find images online or in magazines or elsewhere, look for images in the world that remind me of the feeling that I want to create in this art series, or things that could actually inform the art or be embedded into it. Ideas, again, think about, consider, how could I do this differently? Or, well, that's sort of innovation. And ideas and innovation do go hand in hand a lot. But ideas, I could have, here's an example. So I could have, one idea was like, I'm going to create 12 paintings on 12 by 12 boards. And another idea is maybe what I should do is explore one set of ancestors in each painting. And then I'll just brainstorm, essentially. That's what I'll do, using the little, I think in school, back when my son was in school, they called them word webs. And but the little, where you create the branches and circle the ideas, or Post-it notes, which I use all the time still. I just post a bunch of Post-it notes on my wall. And those are my, 10 ideas for, connected to some book I want to write or some painting series or whatever. So again, if I'm going with that idea of I want to do a painting series, I can next go to inspiration. What's going to inspire me to keep this going? And what is the initial inspiration for this art series? And how will this inspire others? And how will it connect to something, something greater or higher or truer or deeper? So those are the kind of questions I would ask with that. And then integration. So in my case, in using that example, how might this fit in with other things I'm working with on? And wow, could there be a connection to this book I'm writing over here? Or how can one thing inform another? How can I take my own life's journey and infuse my questions and my experience into these paintings? And then imagination, one of my favorite ones is like I can go with this one for a long time. So in that case, an ancestor series of paintings, I can literally think, what if I was this particular ancestor living in this particular time and I wore that particular dress on that day? And I'll create an entire scenario, whether I just imagine it or whether I write it down. And sometimes I'll use my dreams too. I'll write before I go to bed, I'll just write a sentence. Show me XYZ. And I'll do this for my life too. But anyway, in terms of the imagination piece for any project, that works really amazingly well because it's interesting to me how sometimes I'll think, oh, I didn't dream anything. But then the moment I get up, I'm like, I think of something and it's connected. And I'm sure it's because I wrote down that intention. But in any case, I'll play with my imagination on whatever the project at hand is. And finally, innovation. I touched on that with the ideas, but I'll think about like, oh, how could I do? Okay, so we've seen lots of paintings of ancestors. How could I do, these paintings a little differently? Or maybe, what is the one thing that I'm going to do differently in this set of paintings than I've never done before? And I will say I could get, using that particular example, I could get a little bit better about implementation part of that. But I think you get the idea. The innovation helps me connect to new ideas. So this whole page here is about life pathways and how you can explore and look at any situation in your life or your work in such a way that it is aligned with your natural approach and your qualities of being and your principles that we've identified earlier. So look back at the other pages that we've done so far and see what you come up with in terms of pathways. Thank you.